Hey there. Welcome to the Pelvis Project podcast. I'm Megan.
And I'm Roxy. We're two pelvic health experts brought together by passion for our careers, entrepreneurship, motherhood, and the desire for intentional relationships.
Join us in our mission to spread pelvic floor awareness and start conversations surrounding the truth behind genuine health, imperfect wellness, and joyfully navigating life. We are so glad you are here with us.
Let's start the conversation. Hey, Megan, how's it going?
Good. Hey, Roxy.
Long time no see.
Yeah, happy Tuesday. Roxy and I were together all weekend.
It was lovely.
Yeah, we're excited to be back for another episode. We will start with our Tell Us Something Good. Roxy, you want to start?
Sure, I sure will. I'll probably steal yours, but we got to hang out this weekend, and that just was so good. And we got to go see Dr. Yenny and go to her healing summit, and I just felt like I walked away with, I don't know, my cup was full. We'll just say that.
All right. Yes, I piggyback with that. My Tell Me Something Good is the same thing, but we got to get together and have a little weekend away. And not only that, but also, yes, learn from Dr. Yenny and go to an event that filled our cups up, and also walked away with just renewed knowledge and talking about, women's health and faith and that combined. So yeah, definitely a great weekend. We had good laughs, good conversation, good Thai food. Man, we got some good Thai food.
And some good fried pickles.
We did have some good fried pickles. So anyway, but today we're really excited because we're going to talk about imperfect wellness. And imperfect wellness was really kind of one of the backbone reasons why we started this podcast. I believe we even talk about it kind of in our intro. And kind of this understanding that, wellness isn't perfect. And often when we put the word we try to be perfect, it's when we're doing this undoing of all the good things we're trying to do. So in this episode, we're going to explore the concepts of imperfect wellness and kind of this idea that wellness isn't about striving for perfection, but rather embracing balance, self-compassion, and realistic goals in our mental, physical, and emotional health. So we'll share some personal stories as we walk through this, but we hope that everybody can kind of walk away, at least some food for thought, and thinking about how they're approaching, just overall health and wellness. So,
I just think too, as we kind of dive into this, I think that there's a lot of, social media is awesome in some ways and so toxic in other ways. And before social media, this was a challenge too, but I think we all try to just put our best foot forward and kind of, none of us want to be perceived as weak or unhealthy or whatever, like lazy or whatever comes to mind with like the opposite of well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I just think about how like comparison, they say comparison is the thief of all joy, and just thinking about you can be doing so many things right, but the moment you see someone doing something better than you, that drags us down, and it's not sustainable. We think about like what's realistic, what's sustainable, especially here we're in January coming off of New Year's resolutions. And it's like, man, we all have these like ideas of what we want 2025 to look like, right? And it's like, a couple weeks we might be good, and then it putters out because sometimes our expectations aren't sustainable. And so Megan and I are just going to be diving into this, and it's a tension. There's a tension to this, even just the name, imperfect wellness. Like that doesn't feel like those two things fit. But I think that just trying to be perfect or overly rigid sets us up for failure. And then that's just kind of a spiral then, and that's frustrating and defeating. So Megan, why don't you kind of just give us a little bit of a definition of imperfect wellness? Now, also appreciate too, everybody, that this can mean a lot of different things for different people. So there's not a true definition, but we're just we want to really challenge you with this episode and open your minds to maybe a different perspective when it comes to your wellness.
So imperfect wellness, when we're thinking about that, we really, we're kind of, that angle is more of the accepting of the ups and downs of kind of the physical and mental aspects of our health. So if we are perfectionists, which a lot of people are, myself included, that I like to say that I'm a recovering perfectionist. when we have that sense, it's like we're all or nothing. It has to be all the time perfect. And we're rigid in our thinking and we don't allow for the window of tolerance, of flexibility to enter into wellness. That's where it starts to kind of unravel. And if we embrace the imperfections, this can lead to better mental health and better physical health and more sustainable wellness practices. Because a lot of times, if we're trying to be perfect, the second we're not perfect, then we're like, okay, well, I'm not going to do that. And we tend to fall off. So it's like we might go to the gym 5 days a week and we're going and we're going and we've done it for 15 days. And then something happens and it throws us off. And then we're like, well, I didn't do it. So now I'm also going to also eat the cheeseburger and the whatever. And it's a spiral down. And sometimes we have a hard time getting back on versus when we set our expectations. I mean, I want to be clear here. We're not, like Roxy said, this isn't like this isn't like, well, it's okay. I don't have to be perfect. It's a sense of really kind of understanding and listening to your body and knowing that if we are trying to be perfect all the time, we're going to be undoing all the good. And I think that wellness is often like marked as this ideal state, like a perfect body, perfect diet, perfect mindset. But that doesn't, like Roxy said, it's not sustainable and it's not realistic. And so, as somebody who has kind of like, I've definitely seen this in my own life. And I remember the day that I've been going to therapy and working on certain things. And I remember the day that I was like in my laundry room and I was just kind of like, okay, like I had to say out loud almost, it is okay to not have this all done. It was like before I went to bed or something. It is okay to just not have this done. Like it's okay. There's not like there's not a race that we're trying to get everything done perfectly so that it's our life. It keeps going. It's going to be there tomorrow. I just remember standing there in my laundry room and I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to talk my way through this. But that was really kind of a pivotal moment for me, myself personally. And it's something as small as that, but has such big impact because I just apply that now in different areas of my life. And by no means, like I said, I mean, there's nothing sloppy about my life. I can honestly say that, but I have learned to allow for movement and things to happen. And sure, I have a tendency, just like anybody else, to be like, oh, dang, I'm not, I didn't do that. And in that same breath, giving myself compassion for knowing that I might not have done that, but I've done 10 other things that were really amazing. So I think that's, something to think about, Roxy.
It reminds me of Dr. Becky and her parenting advice of like two things can be true at once.
Yes.
You can be doing a lot of really good things and you can take a break or you can slip up. Or, I mean, I just think in some of those times where we see them as failure, and sometimes that is, I think it's good to say, okay, I had a goal and I botched it a little bit. And we can either use that as like conviction and say, man, like what caused me to fall? Or, do I see a trend here? And when I'm really struggling and when that imperfection comes in, like, is that remediable or is that life? And I'm needing to put relationship or rest or whatever that fill in the blank is. I'm needing that. And I see myself failing in quotation marks now because of getting off the track. But actually, like, I got to have a really good conversation over some chips and queso with my kid or with my best friend or with my husband or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, so I just think like even that two things are true can be really good to say, man, I'm trying and I'm making new habits. And at the same time, I can mess up, but that doesn't mean that I'm not still like moving forward or I'm trying to get better or I've done a lot of other really healthy things. So anyway, that when you were kind of saying, made me think of Dr. Becky, like two things are true. Yeah. At the same time, they can be true.
And I think that's such a beautiful thing to remember is that you can hold two things at once. And I mean, just before we were getting on here, I was mentioning to Roxy about some of my own health journey that I'm going on, and just the concept of like, yes, I want healing. In order to do that, I have to be an active participant in that. Like I can't want to feel good in a certain area and not do anything. I have to move forward and do things. And also, two things at once here. I can miss a day of my supplements and it doesn't mean that I have completely screwed up anything. It's just, it's the journey that we're on, and that is okay for it not to be perfect. I told a patient the other day who is young, I can't remember who I felt like I was telling somebody this, but I told a patient the other day, the best thing that can happen to you is to fail sooner rather than later. I
Yeah.
mean, it is the weirdest thing to tell somebody, but as someone who now at 41 years old is practicing that, like, failure can look like different things in different areas. It's almost like there are things that have happened that I thought to myself, if this happens, oh my gosh, that's my worst nightmare. And then they've happened. And guess what? I'm like, still standing, still doing the thing. I survived. It's okay. It's uncomfortable, but that's life. So it's in this sense that same thing. So if you're somebody that it's great, you're working on all these wellness things, but you're noticing that all of the things are stressing you out, challenge yourself to maybe just like one day, if one thing is just one thing too many, pause it, do it 3 times a week instead of every day. Like that's okay. And somewhere along the lines, we have this, again, perfect attached to it, needs to be perfect or we're not going to do it type of mentality. So, okay. So we got some kind of key principles of imperfect wellness.
Number one, we've kind of touched on it just a little bit, or I think this ties in well with what we were just chatting about, but just self-compassion. And I will say I'm probably one of the worst at this, and this is something that my my therapist has been challenging me with lately. But just like speaking kindly to ourselves and creating space for that failure. And even I think attached to this is that like increasing the failure tolerance to say, oh, I tried something that I was maybe
Mhm,
afraid to, or it was uncomfortable for me. And man, like I'm growing from it and I didn't turn out how I wanted it to, but that's okay. Like I am still moving forward. And so being able to speak kindly to ourselves, I think that just, if you can even practice that in small things, that's how I've tried to start practicing it. But just to be able to be kind to myself during a hard time. I
mhm,
think when I'm struggling, I'm most critical of myself and I look at the negative, right?
mhm,
And so I think there's better overall health that just comes out of, and it doesn't matter what, if we're talking about wellness, but really
mhm,
wellness can be attached to anything, whether it's your relationships or your physical health or like your attitude or,
mhm,
just in work or anything like that. I think that we can't compartmentalize wellness to only be physical health. And
mhm.
so like, right now, there's just some hard things happening at work that are just challenges. Like it's just tough. And so
Yeah.
practicing this self-compassion has allowed me then to go into a day with a lighter spirit. And then I can come home not depleted, right? And be still playful with my girls and my husband. And that then is better health, right? If I don't feel just completely empty when I get home, because of this bad circumstance, I've just noticed the power of that kindness, having that self-compassion and saying, I am working as hard as I can on this, and it's not turning out exactly how I want it to, and that's okay. Here's what I can control type of thing, and
Yeah.
I'm doing the best I can. And I'm going to learn something really great from this, and it'll be great when it's all over and I can look back on it. But right now, I just need to do the things or whatever, and I'm doing the best I can. I think just
Yeah.
even telling yourself, I'm doing the best I can. Like if that's all I can muster up, that's been just pivotal for me and just my attitude. And then I do see how that overflows into boosting other areas of my life, which all of me then is well, as good, that's wellness then.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And that's where this, like, it can look so different and also in like different areas. We talked a lot about this kind of over the weekend, but I love that. And that thought of self-compassion, of especially if you're somebody that has children and you think about how if your kiddo, fell down and hurt themselves, that much compassion you would give them. And if you can almost stop yourself when there's those moments of like criticalness in yourself and think like, how would I treat my child right now in this situation? And if you can almost practice doing that to yourself, that was something that I kind of practiced on my own. Yeah, kind of like with my therapist when I was definitely, I mean, I tend to fall into that critical, being very critical of myself. Again, comes from being, perfectionistic personality. I read something the other day in in this devotional that I'm doing. And I really, it's like I know this, but to break it down, but when we have a thought, so we like get this thought and it could be, whatever it is about ourselves or whatnot. And then you have that thought, which can then turn into like multiple thoughts. So we're talking about like negative type thinking here. So we have a thought, goes into multiple thoughts turns into a mindset. And then we have this mindset. So if the mindset is negative, what are you telling yourself all day long? So the most challenging thing is the space between our two ears, which is our brain. So just kind of keeping that in mind. So the next key principle is flexibility, which obviously we kind of talked about a little bit ago, is wellness doesn't have to look the same every day. Sometimes rest, sometimes movement, sometimes indulgence. Like that is okay. And I think working in a population where I see a lot of autoimmune type conditions, I've had to finally step in certain situations and just say like, hey, listen, sounds like what you're telling me is your body is maybe not responding the best to the load that you're putting on it. And you're working with people like this, you have to understand that their systems might not respond like a quote unquote normal. And so you cannot approach somebody and say like, oh, you'll just get through it. Like, just keep at it, keep at it, keep at it. When somebody's dealing with some autoimmune issues, that's not necessarily the case. And it can send them into a flare to where, and this is coming from personal experience. So I think that we have to just keep that in mind that sometimes that flexibility looks like rest, especially if you're dealing with a chronic illness. So, yeah, and I just think that that's really powerful. And I think a lot of people need to hear that. That is sometimes what it looks like.
Well, I think kind of piggybacking off that, the like being flexible, I think too, is keeping like an open mind to
Yeah.
maybe this season, wellness looks like this for me. Maybe it is pushing hard and being really diligent and trying to build some mental toughness or, like whatever that looks like. And then maybe the next season, whether that's the next day or the next week or the next year, whatever that is more, okay, like how do I rest better? Or,
Mm-hmm.
how do I find a little more balance? And I think, just knowing like I'm in a season right now with littles and I've had to try to really test this and challenge my flexibility and say, yeah, before I had kids, I could get like loads of stuff done in the evening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now I've had to try to, and it's taken me some trial and error, but like some flexibility to say, ooh, like, is productivity more important or is relationship more
Yeah.
important in this season? And again, not a cop out, but just really analyzing and like what is better for me, what's better for my family, like what's better for the situation. So I think just even appreciating that it's not going to look always the same. Like you said, maybe not day to day, maybe not week to week, month, whatever that season is, I think really having, being kind of in tune with what's going on with the load that you're carrying. And some seasons are going to require different, your body and you just yourself, you're going to crave different needs there to kind of complete your wellness journey.
Living in a rigid space in your mind and in your schedule, creativity doesn't flow there, peace doesn't flow
Patience.
there, patience doesn't flow there. Like,
Yeah.
if you're somebody here, like, yeah, I identify with just being very rigid with the way I think and the way that I work and everything, then just ask yourself, like, how does your body feel on that? Like, do you hold the tension? And I mean, listen, we're talking about imperfect wellness. We haven't even talked about the pelvic floor, but I promise it's all related because
Yeah.
if you're, in this hyper arousal state all the time, the pelvic floor is going to go right there with you. So, but yes. Okay. So next key principle.
I'll do this one. Setting realistic goals. And this just kind of goes with that progress over perfection. We can have an idea of how we want things to do. And goals could be that, like setting a goal that can look a lot of different ways. Maybe the actual goal itself isn't realistic for where we're at. Maybe the goal's realistic, but the timeline isn't realistic. And so, really, like, maybe you have a big goal, but we need to break that down into smaller bite-sized pieces so that we actually see progress, so that we actually do appreciate and we can acknowledge that we are moving towards it rather than just an all or nothing mentality that kind of goes along with flexibility to say, ooh, yeah, in a perfect world, right? We say that a lot. In a
Yeah.
perfect world, this is how I would be. But dialing that back to say, but in real life, this is my goal. And it's not a compromise in a bad way. It's just realistic. And it's putting our wellness and what we actually have the capacity and the capability for above this perfectionistic, rigid, high, lofty expectation that probably the failure of that is going to have more negative ramifications on our wellness and our mental health and just our motivation than just setting a smaller goal and reconciling that and being okay with that.
Yeah, definitely. Realistic goals are, gosh, they're so important. And again, another conversation I like to have with patients is what's a realistic expectation for you and your schedule and your life for us to be able to get this in? Or, like, I want to find out like what your day look like, what's your activities look like, because I'm going to tailor what I'm going to give you to that so that I can make sure that we're able to have success with that. And want to know, what do you like to do? Because if you hate what I'm giving you, then that's no fun. So I love to find those things out. Like, what do you love to do for exercise? What do you want to get back to doing if you're not doing it? What do you want to keep doing? And just know that, if you planned on 4 days a week and you did 3 days, that's amazing. It's crazy to me when people come in and they tell me, like, I say, well, I could have done better. I didn't do very good this week. And I said, well, what does that mean for you? Like, how? I said, well, I got it in about 4 times. And I mean, I'm like, that is, and this is a mom with, 2, 3 kids. I'm like, that's fantastic. But we're so critical of ourselves. Like, instead of saying, I had a really good week, I got it in 4 times, we so easily come in and say, I could have done better. I only got it in 4 times. So if that's you, we're going to work on this together, everybody. So acceptance of imperfection is our next key principle of imperfect wellness. So acceptance of imperfection. So embracing the idea that wellness is a journey and not a destination. Just like we mentioned before, this is life. It's going to start over every day, which is awesome. We get to start fresh every morning. And the role of failure in growth, it's essential. We need to have those little failures in order to grow from them. That's how we learn the best. I can give you a prime example of this. Well, in a sense here, everybody that has kids is going to know what I'm about to say. Come Christmas time, when they say, we want to help wrap the presents. And if you're somebody who likes things to be perfect, you want the crisp lines and you want the box to be wrapped perfectly. And so I practiced this year. My kids said, they're 10 and 13, we want to help wrap presents. And I said, okay. And in years past, the kids have gotten frustrated. I've gotten frustrated. And then they walk away and leave and we don't do it together. And this year I was like, okay. And I sat there and I wrapped, and everybody else wrapped. And my 13-year-old is getting really good at wrapping presents. But my 10-year-old, he's a boy too. So, and I sat there and everything in me wanted to just be like, let me do it. Let me fix it. And I just let him. And it felt so freeing and so good. And then usually I like to do kind of a theme of like the bows and all the stuff. And so I had the stuff out there, but I just said, you go pick it. And he said, well, I don't know what to do. I said, well, what do you think you should do? So it's not only lessons learned for my kids to be able to make these decisions and feel good about what they're doing, but such a good lesson for me to not take over, think it has to be perfect. Because if I'm doing that, they're seeing that. So anyway, the acceptance of imperfection can actually be really, really beautiful. So thanks for listening to my TED Talk on letting your kids wrap presents.
I was just thinking my therapist she had thrown this at me of just like, when your kids are learning like anything, do we expect them to perfect it the first try?
Right. Yes.
And the answer obviously is no. Like when our kids are learning to walk or when they're learning their ABCs or their colors or whatever, like, goodness, no, like it might take them a long stinking time. And we have to remind them 50 times that that's purple and not orange or whatever it is,
Yeah.
But it's like just part of it. And the more that they mess up, actually, the more we can correct them and we can show them what's right. And she's like, but you're expecting yourself to just get it and be perfect the first time and not fail and not feel like you have to like learn from your mistakes. And that was really convicting of me to just be able to contrast my expectation of my kids and my expectation of myself.
Yeah.
And even though there's obviously age appropriate expectations, but just the process should be similar when we're learning something new, or we're trying to overcome a habit, or we're trying to do something different. There's going to be failure, and just like that, like accepting the imperfection of that process was super, super convicting for myself.
I know. We're all kind of sitting here like, I need to eat my own pie here.
Yeah, seriously.
So, but yeah, I think that listening to all this, I'm sure that we can all think of real life examples where we can apply these kind of thoughts to. And I know I had mentioned to you, Roxy, I think it was over the weekend that I have a picture of, gosh, this was back before I was diagnosed with my autoimmune disease. And I was training for this mini triathlon, and I was like training, and I was running, and I was biking, and I was swimming, and I was like eating right, and I was fasting. I was doing all these things that I thought were just supposed to be like wonderful. And, I was trying to be perfect with it. I didn't miss a day. And what's funny is I look at that picture, and I've thought about kind of realization I have. But when I look at that picture, I remember, like, if somebody else looked at it, you'd think like, wow, look at that. She was in shape. Like, everything looks so great. And I felt terrible. I felt terrible. That was the most probably unhealthy I've ever been. And I was in the middle of the start of my autoimmune trigger. And so I think that, again, wellness looks different. And just because you're doing all the things that you think are healthy doesn't mean, really paying attention to your body and those things, in those moments. And listen, I could have heard a podcast like this back then and I would have just blown it off because I was just in a different state of mind, and body image issues and stuff like that. I was just like, I had some sort of goal I needed to achieve and I had to be perfect to get it. So yeah, I've just learned a lot through that journey and what wellness looks like, and for myself and my body, and that in certain seasons, my body can't keep up with what I would expect, exercise to look like. And so just being flexible with it, which is all, the basis of what we've been talking about here. So, okay, we'll try to wrap this up here, but we've got some practical tips for embracing your imperfect wellness. So here we go. Let go of the all or nothing thinking.
Create a flexible routine.
Build in rest and recovery.
And then consider mindful moments. And so it might just be like using mindfulness to stay present, or don't be so consumed about being perfect or what that end goal is or what the future holds. But just noticing what you have the power to control right now, and what your active movement, your action step could be right now. What can you control?
So overall here, hopefully you guys kind of understand where we're coming from with this kind of imperfect wellness type of mentality. And we just encourage you to kind of like think about and redefine what this means to you personally without the pressure of perfection is really where we're going at. So knowing those areas that are causing a bit of tension within you personally, and potentially causing unneeded stress that is maybe revving your system up in a different manner, which is then fighting against everything good that you're doing. Yeah. And then maybe just like we just invite you to try to reflect on one area where you can maybe start to imply like this mentality of imperfect wellness this week. So again, it doesn't mean that you're going to be lazy or not get things done, but just really taking a moment to think about, wow, is there something that I'm doing in this routine that is just so incredibly stressful to me? And maybe to be able to take a deep breath and just like, I'm going to let this go tonight. Maybe it's the dirty dishes in the sink. That could be it, you know? But yeah, we'd love to hear from you guys, share like your own wellness journeys or your own struggles. You can, send us a DM and on our Instagram page at The Pelvis Project, or connect with us on each one of our personal Instagrams. Roxy's Good Life Pelvic Health and mine is Kansas Pelvic Health. But yeah, we'd love to connect and just, share if you have any like struggles or wins, or celebrate with embracing imperfection. And we'd love to get your feedback on this. But we really appreciate everybody listening. And we are always open to, if you have anything that you want us to talk about, we're happy to do that. Just send us a message. Until next time, thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much for joining us this week on the Pelvis Project podcast. Help us continue the conversation by liking and sharing this episode with friends. And if you really want to do us a solid, leave us a review. If you'd like to follow us on social, check out the show notes for links. And remember, this week, take a deep breath and relax your pelvic floor.